This is David Grasso for another episode of Follow the Profit. Today I'm joined by someone who has a pretty interesting perspective into raising money and to getting businesses started. His name is Mac the VC, otherwise known as Mac Conwell. He's joining me today from Maryland. What's up, Mac?
How's it going, David? It's good to be here, man.
So when you meet people in the elevator, what's the elevator pitch you give them?
What's the elevator pitch I give them? I tell them, if you give me your money, I'll make you more money.
Well, that's pretty convincing. Tell me more.
That's the point of the elevator pitch, right? You want to get to the point where somebody says to ask you more. At Rare Breed Ventures, we look to invest in companies with rare breed founders that can be found anywhere, not just the major tech hubs. So we're looking for the opportunities that are overlooked and counted out.
So let's talk about that. Money gets distributed to tech companies basically in the Northeast and in California, and everywhere else it's just absent. Why is that?
I don't know. Well, I do know. It has to do with the density of where the venture firms and the capital are. So you got Boston, but Boston's because that's where the life science hub is. And so there's a density of capital for life sciences. You got New York, because that's the financial capital. So that's where all the big PE firms are, financial firms, and they got interested into doing venture investing. So there's a big, collection there. And then you got Silicon Valley, which is its own unique thing. But in the early, 1900s, when we get around the times of World War II, and even a little earlier, you had a lot of government money going in to support the war efforts and support all this creation of new technology, which led to this boom of technology companies and led to a boom of capital that just kind of centered there. And so you just got this density of technology and capital, which attracted more. And by the time everybody else figured out what was going on, they had a 50-year head start. And so you get these dense pockets.
So how did this happen, though? Because, even when we were little kids, Mac, because I'm going to assume you're about my age, there wasn't really a big difference in cost of living and in jobs across the country, right? And now there seems to be two Americas, right? These hyper expensive, technology forward America, and then this left behind America. How did that happen?
That happened as when you get past the Great Migration in the 60s and into the 1970s and 1980s, you had this proliferation of people leaving out of the rural parts of the country and going into the metropolises and major cities, right? And as you have people chasing the American dream, what we've seen time and time again is that money leads to more money, right? And so the rich get richer, and as they do, they start to leave more and more people behind. That's how you get a minimum wage that's been left behind for damn near generations at this point, because the folks making money are only thinking about how to make more money. Like, we see this in large tech firms where that's why the show, Undercover Boss is so interesting to me, right? Because you have all these, I've seen it, these CEOs who work at a point where they're detached from the day-to-day work. So the way they see people, spreadsheets. And then on the spreadsheet, every person is equated to dollars. And so if we can save 50 cents here, 25 cents here, or $1 here, that's saving $1 on every person here leads to us saving millions in the aggregate. So yeah, let's start to cut things. Or you have things like shrinkage. So like over time, as inflation goes up, the sizes of products go down. Because it's easier for a cereal company to shrink the size of a box than it is for them to make it cheaper. Right? And so, or make it more expensive. So instead of making the price more expensive, they just make the boxes smaller. And those little things add up to more money because greed is undefeated, right? And so that's what happens. It's really all just about greed.
But in the end, Mac, we know that most job creation, most big ideas, most economic growth doesn't come from people who make cereal boxes. It comes from small business, right? It doesn't come from these big conglomerates. In fact, these big conglomerates buy these small businesses. They gobble it up to guarantee growth. So how do we support small business?
We support small businesses by shopping and spending our money there, right? You support with your capital. If you want to support small businesses, shop at small businesses, right? Like, instead of going to the major jewelry store in your local mall, go to a local jewelry store down the street from your house, right? The way you support small businesses is you fund them. You give them capital. You give them the opportunity to give you that high touch feeling. Because like once you get to the big companies, that white glove, community feel disappears. And they all try to do it. They all come up with like departments of their companies to try and do community outreach and community touch. And it's never the same. Right? It's like going to a deli where you know the owner and you've known them for years. And so the way we support them is we give them capital. The way we support them from like a venture standpoint is we don't. Like, unfortunately, a lot of small businesses do not fit the financial model of venture capital, which is why venture capital is only one portion of the financial stack, right? I think very often people look to VCs and be like, hey, you need to solve this. You can't just do the big tech companies. You got to do these small businesses too. The business model isn't fit for that. And the problem is we haven't innovated to allow other new financial products or to really pump up other financial products like revenue-based investing that really do fit the small business model. So we need more people actually innovating and creating new financial products to support small business. We've gotten to this point where everybody's just like, well, this is how things have been done. It's been done this way forever. It's like, no, we can do new things. This is what we're about. We create things to solve problems. This is a problem we have. Let's create something to solve it. And I don't feel like enough people are spending enough brain power to solve these issues around.
No, we just try tried and true formulas. That seems to be the problem across society. But I want to push back on you, Matt, because we always say that, like, oh, you should shop at a small business. But I'm a millennial. I'm just trying to make it here economically. I'm not responsible for the state of the world. I like my Starbucks points. I like my 5% back on my Prime card. I like my predictability. I want to save money. And as much as I care about small business and want them to succeed, I also care about myself. So how do I balance those?
That's a personal decision. You got to decide what matters for you, right? Does the small businesses in your local community matter more than you getting that Starbucks coffee? If you have to pay an extra 50 cents more to get coffee at, Jenny's coffee shop versus going to Starbucks, where are you going to go? And those are the personal decisions that we have to make every day. And to your point, you just want to save money. You're just trying to make it happen. There are a lot of small businesses that actually offer better priced products. We've been conditioned to believe that, like, oh, all the places we go now give us the best prices, when in actuality, we actually stopped searching for the best prices. We just got lulled into just going to the same places we always go. But at the end of the day, like, those are personal choices. Like, where you go to shop, where you spend your money, you get to decide that. And if you just want to go to all the places that save the most money, fine. But if you really want to support your small businesses, then you got to do that. You can't say I support my small businesses, but then don't spend your money there. Because then you don't really support them. You're now just being a performative. You're just being a performer, right? This is what you say to get clicks on Facebook. Yes, you're virtual signaling. This is how you get clicks on Twitter. Like, oh.
No, you make a really good point about big business. They have convinced us that they are the best deal, but oftentimes they are not. That is an excellent point. So let's talk about the proverbial, low-income neighborhood, we'll call it. Some people call it the hood, whatever you want to call it. How do we change that? Because, we have this idea in our society that poor areas are poor because, they deserve it, or I don't know, or because of historical injustices, or, name your basket of tropes about bad neighborhoods. So how do we make it better?
We need to stop discarding portions of our communities. I'm from Baltimore, right? Sanchester Windtown's a part of Baltimore where the median income is $17,000 a year.
That's like a fraction of the median income in America. That's basically a middle income country right there.
But that's per household. That's not per person. That's per household. Right?
So devastatingly poor. Yeah.
Devastatingly poor. But it's not from lack of effort. Like, these are people who get up every day, go to work. These are people who have to catch 2 and 3 buses to get to work and get home. Like, think about it. People complain about being in traffic trying to get to work because it takes you 45 minutes in traffic to get to work, but you just get there in 20 minutes. We're talking about people who have to take 2 and 3 buses where it takes them 2 and 3 hours to get to work, sitting outside in the heat, sitting outside in the snow. But yet we're going to say they're poor because they want to be poor. No, they don't want to be poor, right? But when you're young and you're growing up in a city like Baltimore, and you're in a household where you don't know what it's like to have running water or electricity every day, where you're just used to your water getting cut off, you're used to electricity getting cut off, you're used to not having food, you will do whatever it takes to survive and eat. And along the way, you don't have people in your community showing you what success looks like. You don't have people showing you like how you go to school to then go to college to then get a career. Like, careers aren't talked about, right? Like, in these communities, because everything about their daily life is survival. They don't even have the bandwidth to strategize a better future. And we don't give them those support. The support we do give them, if we give them resources to live, so we give you food, we might give you shelter if you can get federal aid. But even within, and then we'll show you how to put a resume together. But what's a resume when you haven't worked anywhere for like 4 or 5 years because nobody will hire you, right? And so what do we actually do to move these people forward? We don't give them the opportunities to grow financially. Like, if you didn't make it in high school and you make it to college, we just kind of let you go. It's not like you can go get a job at Bethlehem Steel and make $50,000 a year and support a family. It doesn't exist anymore. And that's why, we need more programs. So, like, there's a company called Catalyte, where if you go there, they have a test. If you pass their test, their aptitude test, they say they can train you to be a software engineer in 6 months. No matter who you are. You walk off the street, take this test, 6 months, you can have a job as software engineer.
That's revolutionary. It makes sense.
We should have things like this for all types of jobs. Like, you don't have to go to college for 4 years to work in HR. You don't have to go to college for 4 years to be a media buyer. You can literally, we haven't thought about what the next wave of apprenticeship could look like. Like, so many of these jobs, we say you have to go get a degree. Like, no. You can literally set up apprenticeships where you can learn to be a media buyer. You can learn to do, social media ads. You can learn to do It's all these things that we can learn, but we don't give people the opportunity to do that. And so you have a whole swath of our country who's left out of the opportunity to grow economically.
That's really interesting because we make it rain in these areas with federal money, right? And it doesn't seem to move the needle, right? So it's like these apprenticeships are a way to make an investment instead of just blowing money that doesn't really lead to better outcomes.
100%, because the money that we're blowing is just to deal with your basic needs of just survival. You need to get beyond survival to a place where you can be comfortable enough to actually move forward. Like, here's a crazy stat. The number one reason for people dropping out of community colleges, like community colleges where you're trying to do better, you're going the way you can, it's one life event. One life event, and that one life event could be getting your car towed. Because now that you got your car towed, you don't have a way to get to work, and you don't have the money to get your car out of impound. And so how are you going to go back to school? You're not. Like, little things like that can throw somebody's life off. But you're like, getting your car towed, like, just get AAA. You don't have a problem. Like, if you come from a community where the median household makes $17,000 a year, you got to make a lot of hard choices. And so we make it rain and give you money just to continue with the survival mode and survival mentality without actually investing in the people to help them grow. And that's just the way I think about it.
But there are exceptional people in these areas. And we see that time and time again throughout history is that, wealthy areas don't tend to produce more exceptional people than poor areas. In fact, that's the one thing that's equal opportunity. The one thing that is different is environment and opportunity. So how do we empower exceptional people that are not born into such luck to help their communities change?
Because the problem is we deify exceptionalism. You can't view these communities through the prism of the folks who are exceptional, because that's fundamentally going to leave out the majority of folks. And then what you do is you deify these folks who are exceptional and you put it on them to solve the problems for their community, when it wasn't the problem they started to begin with, right? And so everybody has decisions to make in their own life, and I can't fault anybody who says, like, look, I made it out, I'm going to be happy, I'm not going to deal with that stuff anymore. That's perfectly fine.
It makes sense, of course.
But we're not setting these communities up for true success. If all we want to do is say, look, so-and-so made it, you can too. Well, I'll give you an example. There was a young lady who I was working with a robotics club in inner city Baltimore. There's one young lady on the team was exceptional. She was doing really great. Then all of a sudden, she was on her path to being a computer science major, going to college and everything. And one day she stopped coming. And then she stopped coming to school. And so checked in with her to find out what was going on. And what happened was she had gotten a job at McDonald's to help her mom pay bills because they didn't have electricity.
Got it.
And they hadn't had electricity for 3 months. And she's like, I just need the help. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. You are on the path to real success to getting out. And her whole thing was like, one, I don't know if I'm good enough for college. Two, I can't afford college. Three, we need electricity right now. And you should know, you know what we did? We got her an internship working for the guy who was like the coach for the robotics team. He ran a tech company. And through her internship, she was able to help her mom. She ended up getting a scholarship with a full ride to college and is now a software engineer. She is an exceptional story. But did you hear all the things along the way where people had to step in to make sure she got there?
But we are all like that. If people hadn't stepped into my life, I wouldn't be where I am today either. We're all in that situation.
We are. But then we need more people like that gentleman who hired her as an intern to help more kids like her. Because the amount of exceptional folks that are in these communities is much larger than the amount of exceptional folks that actually make it out. And that's the part that's getting missed. Right? And so it's like, how do we truly support all of these exceptional people to make it out? And we don't provide the resources for that. We don't, like, it can't just be the exceptional people who made it out to come back. It's all the other folks in the community who care about the community support, the local leaders, the local businesses to really pour into these young people in these communities. And not just the young people, their parents too. And we don't do enough of that.
So, Mac, you're someone who, still goes to these communities. Is it demoralizing to be there? These are violent places. These are places with poverty. Like, I feel like I get anxiety when I go to, poor areas. So do you, because I feel like I want to change it. I feel like I want to, make a difference. And, and it doesn't seem like we know where to start with this type of stuff.
I don't feel uncomfortable because, like, I'm from those communities. Like, I know these people. These are, like, my friends, my family members. These are people I grew up with. But it is heartbreaking. But it's heartbreaking more so because so many people don't understand the true realities of these communities. Right? You see the stories, you watch The Wire, you think that's all it is. But there's so much more of a story to be told that's like, these aren't lazy people. These aren't people who don't want to work. These aren't people who want to be poor. These aren't people who want to live on the system. These are people who are just trying to survive. And they need to figure out a way to live life beyond just survival. But we never give them that grace. We automatically put them in these buckets. And so for me, I'm always encouraged by the work that a lot of community leaders are doing. And like for me, what little bit I can do helping, I'm a VC, I'm investing in companies because I want to find companies that can grow to be unicorns and be worth billions of dollars. But that's also why I invested in a black woman out of Baltimore who was a single mom who had an amazing idea for a product that nobody wanted to back. I've now backed her. Her company's now growing. You know what? She's employing and helping people from her community. You know what else she's doing? She also has a nonprofit where she goes into these communities and she teaches young black girls and gets them excited for STEM education, for, science, technology, and engineering through makeup and jewelry. Last week, she had a session where she had young girls, like elementary or middle school ages, creating LED earrings. They created earrings that lit up, and those
That's
little
quite
girls
a fashion
thought that was
accessory.
so cool, right? But it's a young lady like that who's now empowered to do more good works, and so that's how I help, and hopefully one day I'll be able to do more. But yeah, for me, like, it's heartbreaking, but moments like that are encouraging.
So what is VC? For people who don't know, what's the simplest term? Is it just money that you invest in people and you take a piece of their company?
So venture capital is a subset of private equity, which basically means we make investments into private businesses, right? Most people know like financial advisors, they take your money and they invest it into public companies. So they invest in the stocks, right? We do the same thing. We just invest into private companies. And in my case, companies that are just getting started. So I am a glorified financial advisor. Wealthy people give me their money, and I put their money behind companies to help me make more money.
So your company, Rare Breed, is the Rare Breed the founder that you're referring to?
Yes, Rare Breed is the founder I am referring to, 100%.
So you invest in founders. You're a people first company. What do you look for in someone who fits the Rare Breed, ideal?
Every company and every founder is its own unique situation, but I'm looking for one from a business standpoint. I'm looking for people who have a very unique and direct opinion of way on how they do customer acquisition, experience, and retention. If you show me you know how to find customers, you can get them to buy your product, and they can keep coming back, then you might have a chance to actually win. And by having that mindset, it allows me to take out my own biases where I don't have to know exactly what market you're in. If I know that you find customers, they love it and keep buying it, they love it and they keep coming back to buy it, well, that's how we become the firm that never misses out on the opportunity to invest in a company like Spanx, right? You can imagine, when Spanx is first pitching to a bunch of VCs, like there are a bunch of folks who don't get it. But the moment she says, well, I go to these department stores and sell it to women, women love it, and most women are going to buy 4 of these a year. Okay. Like, I don't need to know everything about this. You clearly figured out a market and something that's working. And then, it's sometimes it's the intangibles. So like the woman I mentioned who I backed in Baltimore, I was working with her for like 3 years and nobody wanted to invest in her. And so what she did was she became a surrogate mother. She gave birth to twins to raise the money to start building her prototype. You can't tell me that's a person who won't do whatever it takes to be successful. Like that level of grit, most people will never be able to see. And then on the flip side, I invested in a 17-year-old kid out of Baltimore who basically hacked Venmo to get his first 25,000 customers. One of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. I just made the bet on him because he was one of the smartest people I've ever met, right? And so every founder in every situation is different. But it's those unique things about them that kind of set them over the edge. We just committed to a company the other day where we're talking to the founders, a really cool company. And I noticed on LinkedIn that he had ran this nonprofit helping returning citizens or people who are returning out of jail. And I asked him about it. He's like, yeah, my dad was a lawyer and he was a pioneer in justice reform. And he's like, really helping people and supporting people is really important to me. And that's why I'm like, oh, yeah. You're definitely the kind of person we want to invest in. Right? So it's those things that sometimes go beyond just the business that we look for.
And these are people that the traditional venture capitalists would have never discovered because they're not in Baltimore, they're not in your community, they're not interacting with these people, and you're going to events to meet these people, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, before we had a global pandemic, I spent a lot of time in my community and other communities, I spent a lot of time in Birmingham, Alabama, and St. Louis, and Detroit, where you get to meet these folks, you get to go in these communities, you go speak at a Chamber of Commerce event, you go speak at Urban League event, you go hang out at the Lesbians Who Tech local meetups. I can't tell you how much crap I got when I used to work for the investment arm of the state of Maryland for going to the Lesbians Who Tech meetup. They're like, why are you going to this event? I was like, it says Who Tech. Like, I'm looking for tech entrepreneurs. Like, I might find one there.
You don't discriminate.
Like, oh.
Equal opportunity here.
that's such a novel concept, right? And so I just learned that when you go wild and you're intentional, you get access to far more people and far more entrepreneurs than you do just waiting for them to come to you.
Yeah, well, you talked about the 17-year-old kid, right? That sent people a penny on Venmo to bring them to scholarme.com. That's pretty interesting. What ended up happening to that 17-year-old?
So that 17-year-old Femi ended up getting some money from us at the state of Maryland, used that to go live in New York and raise $500,000 from a bunch of ex-Goldman Sachs folks. Ended up going to Y Combinator, which is the premier startup program in the country. Raised $2.5 million coming out of that. Got some money directly from the founder and got led by a large venture firm. and now has a company that is growing by leaps and bounds, and will have some major updates coming out soon. He's now 21. He's now a 21-year-old black kid from Baltimore, running a company worth multi-millions, and is on the pathway to being a really large fintech company. So scholarme.com, check it out. Big things coming.
So have all these investments been profitable for you? Because, it almost seems like people would say, oh, you're just doing social good, right? Like, are you making money?
What's the point of the business, right? So
I have to ask the obvious question, Mac.
It takes a long time to get the money back, because here's the thing, like, as a VC, when we invest in companies, we get paid back typically one of two ways. A company goes public or gets acquired. That's a really high bar that takes a long time. So, but I will say many of the companies that we've invested in and that I invested in previously are still doing well and are moving in the direction of being very successful investments. I do not do this just for the social good. Like, yes, do I care about diversity? Do I care about social good? I do. But my job, the point of my job, is to make money for my investors. That is my job. People give me their money to make them more money. So every investment I'm making it with that in mind. Now, most companies are going to fail. I know that, but that's why we invest in companies that's why we're looking for companies that are going to be worth $1 billion. That way, those successes outweigh and cover up all the failures, because running a company is so fragile.
So is this model of VC a bit more profitable because you're dealing with people who don't have family access to capital or friends and family? Typically, when you start your own business, the first money you get is from friends and family. Well, if you're of a modest background, that's not possible, is it?
No, it's not possible at all. And so what I will say about investing as early as we do is it can be very, very profitable with smaller dollar amounts, because when you invest in a company, you're basically putting money in at a certain valuation, right? You're at a certain value, and that value grows out over time. Well, if you go out to Silicon Valley, you'll see companies like when they're first getting started getting valuations of 20 million, 25 million, these very inflated numbers. You go to like a Baltimore, a Philadelphia, Detroit, you might find an early company where their value starts at 4 million, 5 million, 6 million, something far more reasonable, something with much easier to attain expectations. But then from the investor standpoint, the opportunity to generate a lot more. So like in the case of a company that starts at 20 million as their valuation, and then they grow to a $40 million valuation. If you put money in, you've now 2x your money. That's awesome. You doubled your money. If you invest in a company at a $4 million valuation, and then they go to a $40 million valuation, you're now 10x your money, right? So the profitability goes up very significantly from an investment standpoint. So it goes both. So there's some real advantages to finding companies outside of these overpriced, overcrowded hubs.
Well, it seems like the economy writ large, everything's overvalued and overinflated in certain markets and just clinically dead in others. So speaking of that, you worked for the state of Maryland in investing in companies. Is it smart for the government to support, small business in areas that need it?
100%. The largest purchaser in the country is the government, right? The company that has the largest amount of money to spend in the United States is the government, right? And so if we want to jumpstart these communities, if we know, like, hey, we're lacking in jobs, we need more jobs in America. You said it already. Most jobs come from small businesses, but small businesses don't fit the venture financing world or other kind of investment worlds. Then where you get your money to go? The government should be there to kind of supplement. I mean, in my opinion. Right, and then
it's the teach a man to fish principle, right? If you teach them to fish,
yes,
they'll go fishing by themselves. If you just give away money, the money runs out, and then you're done.
Yeah, but that's assuming that the person you gave the fish didn't take that fish and turn it into bait to make more fish, to go catch more fish, right? Like that discredits people's ingenuity, right, and people's want to do more. So fundamentally, I believe that in the state of Maryland, where I work, the Maryland Technology Development Corporation is the largest funder of early stage tech companies in the state of Maryland. right? Here's an interesting fact. They were the first investor in Squarespace. Squarespace is an amazing product that supports small businesses every day. And it was 3 young men out of University of Maryland who got their first check from the state of Maryland. Now, multi-billion-dollar company. They are based in New York. But if they don't get that money from Tagco, I don't know if Squarespace exists today. I will also say that within that organization, they have a fund completely dedicated to stem cell research and commercialization. Because they have been doing that work for the last 10 years, there are now companies being commercialized from the technologies that they were investing in years ago that are now saving people's lives. That technology doesn't exist without, the funding from the government. So do I think the government should be putting money in this? Yeah, I do. And I think they should be doing programs like that all over the country, because then that's when you don't have these like dense hubs in these 3 locations, but you actually have strong ecosystems of both startups and small businesses all across the country. And so, yes, I think they should.
Well, our economy seems to be engineered to attract big business, right? It's very traditional for a big business to announce that they're searching for a new headquarters, and local and state governments, whip out all these incentives. Why don't they turn it on its head and invest in local people instead of trying to attract business?
Because that's the way it's been done for so long. You need a community to see the value of a local business grow for them to really understand it. And I'll give you a great example. So in Birmingham, Alabama, they have a tech ecosystem that's growing, and it's growing around one company. It's a company called Shipt. Shipt is a company that basically does grocery deliveries. Well, a few years ago, Shipt, which is based in Birmingham, Alabama, got acquired by Target for $500 million. So $500 million for a tech company in Birmingham, Alabama. I promise you, $500 million goes much further than $1 billion in San Francisco.
Right? Of course.
But because of that, they've created all these jobs. They also have all these folks who work there who have seen how to grow a company, who are now starting their own companies. You now got a bunch of people who got wealthy through this funding round or this acquisition, who are now becoming angel investors, who are now investing in the local community, right? Who are now starting their own restaurants, right? Like a whole bunch of things came out of this one central company. And so now the folks in Birmingham are like, how do we get another Shipt? Like, instead of us talking about bringing Amazon here, let's have a homegrown company that actually cares about being here. We'll stay here. How do we create more of those? And as we start to see more communities have local winners like that, I think we will start to see these things happen. And like, that's really what I want to see for these communities around the country.
Well, it's really funny you mentioned that, because we just went to Birmingham and Atlanta, and talk about 2 cities that used to be the same size, the same economic might, and now Atlanta has the world's largest airport, is the home of Coca-Cola, Chick-fil-A, too many other things to name, and Birmingham is kind of fading into obscurity. I have friends who live there. I've been there many times, but this seems like the way out of their hole for communities that have fallen behind economically.
It definitely can be a way out of the hole, but this also goes back to something you mentioned earlier, right? When something like that happens, the founders and individuals who got wealthy through those acquisitions need to pour back into the community, right? Every time you have a successful exit like that in one of these communities, and that doesn't lead to the creation of angel groups, venture groups, new companies, new small businesses, it sets a community back by a decade. Because you get one of those like once a decade. But once you get more of them, it starts to build on itself. So it goes from once a decade to once every 5 years to now you're just getting a bunch of them. But the moment you have one and they don't pour back into that community, then it leaves a gaping void. And you have to wait for the next one.
So I see Twitter as a place where most trolls go to bother other people. And somehow you've turned Twitter into this hub for, finding talent and investing in people. How the hell did you do that?
I don't know, man. It was just luck. Like, I was just tweeting about, I started off just tweeting about the things I had learned in my, time being an entrepreneur and now being an investor. Because there's so many things that we take for granted in this industry that are just known, right? You just know that VCs don't sign NDAs, right? You just know that valuations don't really have much to do with a business at the early stage. It's far more about leverage, like
or reality for that matter.
yes, or reality for that matter, right? You just know, like, to get to VCs, you got to network and meet people. You just know, like, for a pitch deck, these are the slides you need. And there's a new first-time founder every day who doesn't. And so all I was doing is just trying to give advice and, like, demystify venture capital. And as I did that, just more and more people were gravitating towards it. And so I just decided to keep doing it and be consistent with it. And it was really the consistency of it. And then also, like, the content I'm talking about, I'm always trying to help people. And so I have the majority of people on my timeline, majority of people who follow me are of the same mindset. They're looking for help, or they're looking to help others. And, not as many of the trolls. The trolls still happen. Like, I get trolls, I get haters, like, it happens, but, like, that's not what I do it for. I do it for all the people that I help. And then, let's be honest, I do it for me selfishly, right? Me growing a presence on Twitter helped me raise my fund, right? Like, I'm still fundraising, but, like, me putting my presence on Twitter and growing that, like, definitely helped. There are people who I admire and look up to who know me now because of Twitter, which is, like, the coolest thing ever.
Well, it seems like you're in the right place, right time, too, because your name is Mac the VC, right? Like, you branded yourself, right? And we're going through a moment here where we're having a lot of cultural awakenings about wealth gaps, specifically between Black communities and just other communities, we'll call it. So have you leveraged that to try to, advance the cause here? Because, wealth gaps concern all Americans, not just Black Americans.
I have, but then I push back on it because people talk about venture like it's supposed to be the answer to the wealth gap. And the problem with that is that assumes that most companies are going to be successful, or that a large swath of these companies are going to be successful. In actuality, most of these companies aren't. Most of these companies that I see that are coming up are going to fail. It's just the numbers, the stats. This is what's going to happen. And so knowing that, when you think about what it takes to close the racial wealth gap, or just the wealth gap in general, one of the things that happened as I was getting the fund up and growing and started to make investments was one of the companies I invested in is this really fast growing, high growth startup in Silicon Valley. It's standard Silicon Valley, a founder who had started 2 companies. They both exited. He's done really well. This is third one. This is going to be the big one. And so that company went from like 0 to 16 million in revenue in like 7 or 8 months, something crazy, right? Raised a whole bunch of money. And so I got my best friend, who was my former CTO for my startup. I got my best friend a job as an engineer at that company. He's one of the first like 3 Black people they hired. He's one of their first 50 employees. They paid him more money than he ever made in his life. They gave him better benefits than he had ever had. And they gave him more stock than I own in the company as an investor. And so when this company does well, or does like a quarter of what everybody thinks it could be, he'll become independently wealthy, which means my godson will never have to worry about paying for college. That means my godson will probably have a trust account, for when he turns 18, right? My friend and his wife will be able to do more real estate investing. That means the next generations of their family will actually have money to generate wealth. That has nothing to do with venture. It has everything to do with access. Because the only way you ever get a job to a company like that is you got to be in these circles. And so now a big thing that I'm working on is how do we give access to those types of jobs to more people? Because it's not just going to be the founders. It's also going to be the employees. And so how we really have a diverse employee pool where people can become one of the first 50 to 100 employees at the next Uber. Because if you're one of the first 100 employees at Uber, you're rich today.
Of course. Talk about a viral app, Uber. But, what you're suggesting, too, speaking of virality, is basically culture's infectious. So you place your friend there, right? He's going to make some money. He's going to, lead to different decisions at the company, right? His descendants are going to have a different situation than he did. And it's kind of like that's kind of how you change things, correct? Having a very long-term view on things.
100%. That's how you change things. It's the long-term view. And, when people ask me, what's my most proudest things I've done having started my fund. One is investing in the woman who became a surrogate mother, but two is getting my friend that job. Like, I always felt bad that the startup we had wasn't as big as we thought it could be. But this was my chance to like give him that, access and to change his family's life and trajectory. And that's completely separate from like what I do, where I say, this is how we're going to change the world. Like, let me just give my friend a job. And he got two of his friends' jobs there, right? Like that helps, and that makes a difference. And so, some of it's money and some of it's access. And hopefully I'll be able to bring a little bit of both.
So when you take these startup founders, right, and you find them, right, you found the 17-year-old, right, and then you kind of just stick them into this new ecosystem. What's it like?
It's scary for them. It's a lot to learn. There's a huge learning curve. There's a bunch of skills they got to pick up along the way. But that's the stuff I can help you with, right? Like I can teach you how to do a financials. I can teach you how to put a pitch deck together. I can't teach you how to use a Venmo hack to get 25,000 users. Right?
No, that's pretty novel, right?
So like, I know there's a bunch of stuff that we take for granted that a lot of VCs just want entrepreneurs to already have. I'm okay if you don't have that stuff because we can get you there. It'll take some time, but we can get you there. Because, a lot of them are going to be, scared. They're not going to trust investors. Like, it's just all these other things that come into it. And a lot of that just has to go with like cultural competency. Like, I'm okay giving these founders grace of like, you don't need to know everything. That's okay. You're going to make mistakes. That's fine. We can work through them. They're not like, these aren't the most astronomical things to get over. And so, that's what it's like. You don't just throw them into the wolves. You kind of handhold them as much as you can and, give them directions when you can.
Isn't it crazy with telecommunications and, mass travel that we've developed these bubbles of culture and we kind of don't talk to each other? And like this creates all sorts of, hilarious and serious problems in our society. Like seriously, we don't talk to each other. We all live here. We all pass each other in the street. Like, how do we not speak the same language?
Because we don't grow up. Like, we're all in the same communities, but we all experience different cultures, right? And so it's very easy to not speak the same language when we are some combination of nature versus nurture. If you ask me, you're a little bit of both. But like the nature you're in informs the way you view the world. Like if you live in a community where the cops are always helpful, where you see people in your community like go to Dunkin' Donuts and buy coffee for the cops, and you're always happy and it's always pleasant. They're around at the local fairs. You've only ever seen good from them. It's really hard for you to fathom somebody telling you that they see cops as the enemy, that they come from a community where cops don't care about them. Where I tell you that the first time I had somebody pull a gun on me, it was a cop when I was a kid. Right? The first time I was stopped and frisked, I was 13 coming back from playing basketball. The only time I had my jaw broken is when I got pistol whipped by a police officer because a good friend of mine was dating a white woman. Like, if I tell you that, you're going to look at me like I'm crazy and I have two heads because you're like, that can't be true. I know cops. All the cops I know are good people and they've only ever done good things. And I'm telling you the exact opposite.
I think the truth is somewhere murkier than that. I don't think there's this idealized cop or these.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
You say that, but I had this exact conversation with somebody. Like, I literally had this exact conversation with somebody who told me, he's like, I don't believe you. All the cops I know are good people. Why would you be scared of the police? They're here to help us. And it's because he wanted to ask some police officers for some directions, and I was uncomfortable. He's like, yo, what's wrong with you? I was like, yeah, we don't deal with police. Like, I had that conversation with a white counterpart of mine, right? And so that's how we end up speaking the different languages, because we all experience the world very differently. And then when you have difference of experiences and try to come to a consensus, it becomes really hard. Because if I've never experienced it that way, then it's hard for me to understand what you've gone through or even to believe you.
No, it's true. Our experiences do shape who we are, and we do view the world very differently because of our experiences. I guess I try to see things that, the truth is much murkier and messier than our experiences would suggest.
I mean, I agree with you. I just wish more people did too.
So how'd you get past, this how did you grow up in these surroundings and one day just decide, you know what? I'm going to make it. And not only am I going to make it, but I'm going to help people make it as well.
I have really good parents. I have really good parents, and I had a really good father who always instilled in me, one, the idea of entrepreneurship and ownership, and who let me know that it was okay for me to chase my dreams because he didn't get a chance to chase his, right? And so having my parents there really helped. It gave me grounding, and then, just hard work and luck along the way, right? And then also recognizing, like, to your point, the only reason I'm here today is because of all the people who helped me. And so I would be doing them a disservice if I didn't help others.
Well, I think in the end, it sounds like you're the rare breed.
There's a little something to that. There could be a little something to that.
Where do we find out more about? Go ahead, Mac.
I was going to say, I guess I look for founders who remind me a little bit of myself sometimes.
Isn't that right? Yeah. It's hilarious that we look for talent, and a lot of times we're looking for different versions of ourselves because we understand that. We don't understand people who don't resemble us.
100%.
Where do we find out more about you, about Rare Breed, and about Mac the VC?
So you can check out rarebreed.vc, it's our website, or you can find me on Twitter. It's at Mac Conwell, at MacConwell. So check me out on Twitter, Mac the VC. I'm pretty active.
Yeah, I saw that. And you're inspiring me to get on Twitter because to me, Twitter is this garbage can that it's really hard to find good stuff on Twitter. So thank you for inspiring me to spend more time on Twitter, Mac.
Absolutely. And looking forward to tweeting back and forth with you.
Awesome. Thanks. So we live in the world where bigger has been better for quite some time. We live in a world where everything is tooled toward big business. But really, small business is the future. They're innovators, they create more jobs, and they really have more disruptive potential. But we see local and state governments pretend it's still the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And really, like the music stations tell you, we're in today, right? Today, you need homegrown businesses, specifically technology businesses. That's where most of the future wealth of tomorrow is going to come from. So we need to have our policies reflect that reality. When you have underinvestment, when you have brain drain in your area, whether you're in an urban area or a rural area, you need homegrown technology firms. When you create local venture capital funds to invest in local businesses, you're building in your tax base of tomorrow. And really, we don't see that. We saw our guest talk about it and how, one company in Birmingham, Alabama can make all the difference because in the end, culture and economic growth is infectious. And whole swaths of the country are being left behind. And the only way to reverse that is really to use the power of the purse to make investments in people who already live there. We can't always import prosperity. Prosperity has to come from the ground up. So let's stop giving subsidies to big companies to relocate jobs, which in the end, that doesn't create more jobs. It just shifts them around the country. Instead, let's empower local entrepreneurs to create solutions that make sense in their communities. And I think that's a much more practical way to do things in America today. Thanks to all of you for joining me as we followed the prophet with Mac the VC. What an interesting way to disrupt the way we're doing things. And as we all know, today we need a lot of disruption in many corners of our economy. A shout out to our team of producers who work hard to make this happen. I'm David Grasso. If you enjoyed the podcast, please give us 5 stars and give us a review so that others can learn what the show is all about. Follow the Prophet is a production of Gingrich 360 and iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also view us on YouTube.